because like when it first happens, you can kind of, I feel like, grieve outwardly because everyone's expecting it. Everyone's like, oh my god, they should be sad, that's awful. But then after a while, especially people who like don't understand, they just kind of expect you to like bounce back and be super resilient, and it can be weird to have to adjust to like putting it away for when you have to go back to like school or your job or whatever it may be.
Who was the loved one that you lost?
I lost my dad when I was 11 in a motorcycle accident. Yeah.
Do you remember the moment you were told that he was gone?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember like the day of, I was waiting for him to come home, like in the driveway, like riding my scooter around. And then I was trying to call him, and I called him like over and over again, and he just wasn't answering. I was like getting a little freaked out because he was supposed to already have been home. And the last time I called, an EMT answered, and I was like, what the heck? He's like, you need to call your mom, you need to call your mom. So I'm like freaking out. And I go talk to my mom, and she's like already crying. She tells me that he'd been in an accident. So I was kind of like, when I found out that had happened. But then the day that I found out he'd actually passed was 2 weeks later, because he was in the hospital like in a coma for 2 weeks. And I just remember after school one day, my mom like sat us down, and she like just kind of told us that he was gone. So.
What did you previously believe about grief before you became somebody in grief?
Okay, so since he passed when I was like 11, I was already pretty young, so I don't think I had like a big idea really of it. But I guess before then, I didn't realize how much it can really affect everything, because you can hear about like all these stories and things. I just don't think I actually had like a grasp on it whatsoever. I think I just thought it was extra sadness almost since I was so young.
What are some of the interactions you've had with other people who haven't lost someone before?
Sometimes it can be really interesting because something that's sometimes really weird is like when I guess people kind of like, it is normal that everyone just kind of assumes that everyone has like two parents a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah.
So like especially when I was younger, like now it's not so bad because I have like a good like grasp on that kind of thing. But when I was like 13, 14, that kind of range, and like first going into high school, it was really, really hard for me to like tell people that hadn't dealt with any of that, because like they would feel bad and say I'm sorry, but I would just like feel really awkward in the moment because I wouldn't know how to like explain it to them, kind of thing. And I remember like anytime I told anyone, it was always like such a big deal, because like I feel like at that age also just don't really understand. And so I guess a lot of interactions have just been, I would say, confusing, to put an overall word on it.
Yeah. Do you think that you understood what had happened? Like, when did you think maybe you started to understand what happened if you didn't?
I think even at the time, like when I first found out, I was definitely in shock for a little bit. Like I didn't cry when I first heard it. So I guess for probably the first like 2 years, I feel like I was kind of probably hiding from it a little bit, and it's just like none of it felt real for a really long time. And I don't think like it gets like necessarily easier, but like you learn how to deal with it, kind of thing, which I know is like kind of a common like consensus with grief things. But I guess just as I've gotten older, it's just gotten easier just as I've aged.
What advice might you give to someone who's just lost a loved one, especially like someone who's younger like you were?
I would definitely share things with them, like to never try and think of what you could have done or what you shouldn't have done, because all in all, like it's any one person's fault, and you really can't blame yourself for anything. Like, if there's that one thing you said or one wish you said, like, you can't focus on that, and you kind of just have to focus on like all the good things that happened, and just be grateful for something that you did have with them, because like it's not any person's one fault, and you really shouldn't, because you can put like a real burden on yourself if you're trying to pinpoint things you did and or didn't do. And I think it's just really important to like be grateful for the time you did have with them. That's probably my biggest thing.
Mm. Do you remember the moment when you started to really, when it started to really sink in that he was actually gone?
Um, I say because it happened at the beginning of my sixth grade year, and so it just felt really, really weird for a while because I didn't go to school for a bit, and like those that first month was just really like just strange. But I'd say I don't know, like maybe 4 to 6 months after is when I started realizing like, wow, like he's really not ever gonna be around again, you know? Because I feel like sometimes it just felt like he was on like a work trip or something, like just how it felt. Then after a while, it just kind of sinks that he's like never gonna come back. So I'd probably say less than a year, but yeah.
For me, I guess it comes in and out sometimes. Like, for me, like, I will feel grief for like a few hours and then it'll like disappear almost, or like I won't be feeling, like, actually be feeling it for a while, for like even months at a time sometimes, and then there'll just be like times where I just like break down. Does that happen to you, or has that happened to you?
Yeah, that absolutely has. I totally get that. And I think it 100% does come in waves because it doesn't happen as much now just because it's been a while, but I used to have moments where like I'd feel okay for a little bit, but then like something like a big event or something would happen in my life, and I'd be like, damn, like I really wish he was here, you know? Like my eighth grade graduation, I was so like I was just wishing that he was there. And then even my sophomore year in high school, it's a little bit older. I'm on the softball team, and I hit my first home run on his birthday, and it was just like it was really crazy that I hit a home run on his birthday, and like it felt like it was for him, but at the same time, I was like, damn, really wish he could see that, you know? So I totally understand the waves thing.
What might you say to people who haven't lost anybody but are encountering, or have like a friend or a family member who lost someone close to them?
I would say to just be very like just be there for them, and like if they're expressing something like that they need, maybe without directly saying it, like just do your best to try and help them out, but also don't like try not to push them into doing things that they're not exactly ready to do yet. And if they need like a small push for something, like little things like that's different, but I'd say just being very patient as well, because especially if someone like if you don't know what it's like, it can be really hard to understand that. So I think patience is like the key to helping someone out that's going through something, and just being a good listener.
What is the moment that you've had with like the biggest impact when it comes to grief?
Biggest impact on my life from it. I think honestly, the biggest impact was more. I don't know how to word it, but I guess it's not. It doesn't directly pertain to me, but it was very, very hard on my mom, and it made things for my mom. It made it really, really hard for my mom to like parent correctly, I think, and so there was a lot of issues with that, and like I feel more like emotions and not so great things like about my mom than I do about my dad. And I think like that is probably the biggest impact because of how much it impacted her to then which it, me. Yeah. It pretty much impacted my mom the most, which impacted me a lot because she just couldn't really be there as much as I think would have been necessary, I guess.
I guess for me, it was hard seeing my mom cry because I never really saw her cry
Mm.
before that. Maybe about little things, but is that something that impacted you seeing her cry if you did?
I think it did a bit. Before it passed, I I can only think of like a time or two that I'd really seen her cry. But it wasn't over like massive things, so I kind of get what you're saying. But after he had passed, I would sit in the car with her for like hours while she would like cry. Not cry the whole time, but I would just like listen to her a lot. And which at the time I just wanted to help my mom and it was great, but I don't like it was also really hard for me to try and like deal with that because like I was also trying to feel my own grievances and things. So then like trying to help my mom with hers too was really tough for a while. So it was definitely weird, but then at some point it just kind of became normal that to see her like stressed out and things like that. Yeah.
Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have four. I have an older brother. He's my half brother though, so we the same mom but different dads. But he still like grew up with my dad too. And then I have three younger siblings.
What was it like with the your older brother who had the a time with like your dad too, like talking to him about it and things like that? Or did you talk to him about it?
I think it was just a little bit different for him because we have the same mom, but he still has like his dad, and my dad was like his stepdad technically. But I still remember like my older brother, like crying over my dad's like shoulder in the hospital, and I think it affected him almost just as much because my dad still treated him like his own kid, kind of thing. And they used to butt heads a little bit, over like nothing like crazy, but just typical like parent kid bickering things.
Yeah.
But I could tell that he still like loved him a lot, and I think it honestly, and I couldn't really see that all the time at first, and it kind of really opened my eyes that like how much like my dad like meant to my older brother too, which was bittersweet at that time. But yeah.
What was it like with the first person who you maybe told who like you had to tell? Or like did you
Um,
tell people?
um, I can't I can't remember who I first told on my own, really, but I do remember like I was playing softball at that time too. I was on like one of those year round teams as like a little 11-year old, and I remember I didn't tell the team myself, but obviously like my mom had told my coach and things. And I remember my first practice back, like I got like a really big hug from my coach, and then I remember the first day back that I went to school. I remember thinking I was like, oh, I'll have to like tell people, but like everyone already knew. Like my whole class had like made me cards and things like that, which was really sweet at the time. But I can't remember a specific time that I had to tell someone, but I do remember kind of like what I mentioned earlier a little bit, but first going into high school, and that was like the first time I really had to like explain it to people because everyone in middle school already knew, and then getting to high school, it was weird to have to like when it came up to let people know, it was really strange. But after doing it for a little bit, it just gets easier, and it just becomes just like something that's a part of me, not like necessarily something that just happened to me, if that makes sense.
Mm. I know the answer to this, but just for people who are listening who maybe haven't experienced grief, do you think it ever ends at all?
I don't think it has like a true stopping point. I think it gets easier over time, and like you learn how to deal with it, and you learn like more about yourself and like what helps you get through like those bad waves. But I mean, it's been 7 years, so I mean, maybe someday it will. But as far as I know, I don't really think it has an end because there's no way to think. Because sometimes you're just thinking certain things. It's like, oh, what if they were here for this or that? And yeah, I don't think that there's a time that it just stops.
What was it like having interactions with people who had lost somebody that's not a parent? I guess because it's very different to lose a parent than it is to lose somebody else.
Right. I mean, I guess one example is like my mom because she lost her husband, whereas I lost my dad, and that's really the only one I can think of. But I remember that was always weird because it's even though we lost the same like human being. We didn't lose the same like person, you know, because she obviously knew him much differently than I did, and obviously much more well than I did. And so it was always really weird with that because sometimes she would like turn it into like a competition almost,
Hmm.
which was really strange. But definitely weird because sometimes, like when you're not losing the same relative or the same kind of thing, it's hard to like kind of articulate those feelings because it's just totally different like relations, you know.
What was it like for you at his funeral or celebration of life or equivalent to that?
Um, it was a little. It was just strange and like new to me. It was very weird because I'd never been to a funeral before. The first funeral I went to was his, and I just remember having my mom like pick an outfit for me to wear, which was weird. Like she bought a new dress for me to wear to it, and it was just so weird to like buy something for that, you know. And when I went, I remember seeing a lot of people that I knew, a lot of people from school and from softball. It was just very strange to see so many people there, and there's like a lot of I'm sorry's and all that, and it's a little overwhelming just because like you yourself don't even know what to do about it yet, and no one else does, and it's kind of just this weird like no one really knows what to say. I feel like, but I don't know. I'm always the person that kind of like acts like they're totally fine doing things like that. So I remember like before the actual like service thing. I don't really know the terminology here, but like while waiting for people to arrive and things like that, I remember like cracking jokes and like laughing with people, and just because I probably just wanted to avoid it, like the feels. But yeah, I remember it being very very strange to have so many people there for me.
I remember just like the interactions with people are so weird at those
Uh,
things. And it's kind of hard to explain to people who haven't.
I agree because it's like you and whoever's there you're interacting with maybe talking about something totally random or just about something that's in front of you, but like behind you in the conversation is just like this weird like energy of like why you're really there. I feel like it's just yeah, it's very strange.
What was it like reading all those cards that you got from your classmates?
I remember reading them. I read them like I didn't read them all when I first got them in class. I read them like on my way home from a softball practice, I think, because I left them in the car or something like that. And I just remember just like seeing everyone that wrote something, and it was very like heartwarming to see that because I mean you can feel like really alone during times like that because it feels like no one really like gets it. And even though I knew like my classmates probably didn't really get it, like it was very very sweet to see that like people still care and like that people want to help is really really nice. So I remember being very grateful.
What was it like when those cards kind of stopped coming? All that kind of love and
Right.
like stuff stopped. Because I remember we got a lot of flowers from people, and just it was so nice having them, but just knowing that they were all gonna die as people like stopped talking to us as much or like comforting us in 2 weeks or like a month. And it was just we're still going through it, maybe even more so as it goes on. And
Right.
yeah.
um I totally get what you're saying. So when my dad had passed, my little brother, he was only during his accident he was only 4 days old, and my dad had passed when he was like 2 weeks old, roughly. Um, and so for a while we were getting like a lot of diapers, a lot of baby toys. We had a lot of like meals and like food delivered to our house for a while. You know all the things, and we got those for a while, like I don't know, like a good couple of months or so. But like when it stopped, similar to what you were saying, it's just strange because like all the things like stop, but all the feelings and things are still there. and it's almost like you kind of have to partially relearn how to deal with it, but almost in disguise. Because for like when it first happens, you can kind of, I feel like, grieve outwardly because everyone's expecting it. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, that should be said. That's awful." But then after a while, especially people who like don't understand, they just kind of expect you to like bounce back and be super resilient. And it can be weird to have to adjust to like putting it away for when you have to go back to like school or your job or whatever it may be.
What was it like for you grieving in public, basically, when you kind of can't help it but cry or just like show it
Mm-hmm.
when you don't necessarily want to?
Right.
Today, for me, during class, in my philosophical puzzles class, we were reading a thought problem, and the one that I got had my dad's name in it, and it's Putnam. It's an uncommon name to see, so I'm not really used to that. And I just started freaking out inside. I don't know why. It was like, but I started shaking and I just had to leave early. And I didn't say anything. I just left. And yeah, I don't know. I went to go get food in the dining hall and I started crying in the dining hall and I was trying to hide it and as I was walking back to my dorm room and then I just watched videos of my dad that I had and
Oh.
looked at photos, kind of try to
Mm-hmm.
let myself feel it because I guess that's what I've found is kind of best for me, at
Yeah,
least, is try to let yourself feel it because if you don't, then it's just all inside and it just gets worse and worse.
I totally agree with that. I am with you on the feels thing. Not even just about like even my dad, but just like generally, I totally agree. Like feel the feels because if you don't feel them, you're just gonna have to like deal with it later, and it's just gonna build up. Um, and I've definitely done a fair share of crying in public places. Definitely got some experience there. Um, I remember in I think it was seventh grade. I was in my Spanish class, and we were doing this weird like activity. We were all sitting in a circle, like in chairs, and the like object of the activity was one person. You would say something, like say you would say like it was in Spanish, but I'm not gonna talk Spanish. Like someone would say, "Oh, a dog," and if you had a dog, like you would stand up, right? And so someone said like a dad, and I was like, "That's." And like they had no, they weren't doing it to spite me or anything like that, but I just remember like it just hit me. I just started crying because I was like, I can't stand up, like it was really really weird. I just remember crying, and my Spanish teacher at the time, she was new that year and she had no idea. She like pulled me in the hallway and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, told her, and she was like, "Oh, like I'm so sorry." I was like, "It's okay," but that was definitely a weird one. I remember like the whole class felt so bad, and it was just really awkward for me. But that's one that like really sticks in my brain just because it was so strange, like how it happened. But yeah, that's the biggest one.
Do you remember what it was like staying home that month or so you said when summer was over and you just were there at
Yeah, that.
home, not going to school, not necessarily seeing your friends? For me, I
Mm-hmm.
stayed home for like months, really, at least 2 or 3 months on and off. Occasionally, I'd go to school on a day, but I usually wouldn't be able to. But
That's one thing that like sometimes I haven't thought about it too much because that's one of the things that my mind has completely like blacked out because I remember like going to the hospital and seeing my dad, and I remember like I think while he was in the between him being in the hospital or the accident and then him passing, I think I was still in school for that 2 weeks because I remember the same day he had passed, I like made like the sixth grade like varsity volleyball team. I remember it was the same day. I remember coming home and I remember like sitting down and hearing that. But then the next thing I remember at all is like getting all those cards. And I remember like I know I had been gone for a good amount of time, around a month, but it is totally blacked out. I can't remember one day in between, which is really weird. and it freaks me out a little bit because I have zero recollection. I think
Yeah.
my mind blocked out because it must have been really hard, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really remember it either. I, yeah, trying to think about it is there's
It's
not a
uh,
moment that pops up that's I don't know.
it's really weird.
Yeah, there's like I know we were getting like meal services then because it was hard to cook and
That
he used to be the one to cook, but and I can remember opening the boxes, but I can only remember that when I wasn't staying home. I can remember that. I can't remember it when I was actually home just being
mhm.
there and being sad.
It's really strange, like what your brain can block out. And I've
Yeah.
never really thought about like how much time like my brain has just like chunked out because I seriously can't remember a single moment from that month or so. It's crazy.
Yeah, for me I lost a few friends sort of in relation to
Oh, that's
losing my
awful.
dad. Um yeah. Did you lose anybody in relation to losing your dad? People being idiots about it. God.
I didn't. I wouldn't say that I like lost any friends, but I haven't had too many like nasty encounters, but did have one. It was I don't remember what grade. I think it might have also been like later in sixth grade, like later that year. But I was on the bus and there was this kid. He lived on my road too. We got off at the same bus stop and whatnot. And we were arguing about something. Some typical sixth grade crap, whatever it would have been. Um, we were like kind of like roasting each other, as a sixth grader would say. And I don't even remember all the things that we said, but I was like, oh well, if you like do this, and then he went, well, at least I have a dad. And then
Dear Lord.
I just like immediately started crying. I was like, that was messed up, dude. Like everyone on the bus was like, no, that's too far, man. Like that's too far. And yeah, that's probably kind of the closest thing, but I don't remember specifically like losing anyone because of it, but that certainly happened.
Yeah, it's quite an ordeal dealing with people who don't understand, especially when you lose someone when you're not really adults yet. I was
Exactly.
I was 17, but we're still not like adults, and I can only
Right.
try to imagine what it was like when you were 11. Um, but yeah, people just don't they just don't get it. I don't know. Unless like it happens to you, you just can't
Exactly.
understand it at all.
Yeah, there's just no way to really picture it without going through it.
Yeah. One of like I had my two closest friends come to the funeral with me, and yeah, they were nice that day. And I even called over one of my friends like the day my dad died, and he spent the day with me, and my cousin did too, one of my cousins, and that was nice. Do you remember who was like supporting you on that day actually? Like on the day he
Uh,
died, or if there was anybody like there, or if you were just kind of like left there while your mom was like doing like
the day of, I believe, because I remember going up to my mom's room and like seeing her crying with my older brother, and I can't specifically remember, but like while it first happened, I remember like I was like just with my mom and she was just holding me and we were just like sitting there. So she was good then. And just like I remember just having all my siblings with me really and all of us just kind of sitting together, like crying, not knowing what was happening. Um, and that's the day of the accident. But I remember my mom had to like drive to the hospital because he had gotten like airlifted to a hospital in Maine because it was better than the ones in New Hampshire that he had been near.
okay.
Um, and then kind of the same thing the day that he had died. Same thing. I just remember sitting on the couch with all my siblings. So I guess just my family because since I was so young, I didn't really have any like super duper close friends like that I would have called. So I'd say just like my siblings and my mom.
Yeah. Can you think of anything else you might want to share to people just in general to like who have experienced it, who haven't experienced it? like anything like that?
Maybe just like generally, if you have someone like maybe close to you that's going through it, kind of like I said earlier, just like to be patient and be there for them because it's not an easy thing and it's not a switch you can flip off and um, I guess just be weary that even on someone's best day they could be feeling some pretty deep stuff. So I guess just be wary and I guess just be aware that you don't really know what someone's going through and people that are going through it, that even though it gets really, really tough, that it does get easier and it does get better.